Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I've had a busy time sorting things in the house, so I haven't had time to be as creative as I normally am. So I've been sort of cleaning and decluttering, and now we found a blockage on the drive. There's always something, isn't there? So I started this morning. I was about to record, and then a gentleman arrived to try and sort out the blockage, which we can't sort out because we can't find the drainage thing or whatever. So it all happens when I'm about to record. So what I've done is I've started with a piece of 5.5-inch square card, and it's Pink Frog smooth card. So it's 5.5 inches square. And what I've done is I've cut another 5.5 inches square piece of card, and then I've cut a 4-inch square out of it. Now, those of you that have got all those dies, those generic dies like your circles and your squares, you can just cut a square out with your die. I don't have a square die. Don't ask me why, I should really, but I don't have a square die. So I've improvised. And what I've done is I've cut out a 4-inch square on my cutter. I've then drawn around that with my pencil, and I've then cut that out with my scissors. And then if it's not quite perfection, obviously a die gives you perfection, but I quite like adding some distressed edges. Now, I use my scissors. I know a lot of people frown if you use your scissors for distressing. I don't have a distressing tool, so I'm using my scissors. I'm very careful. So I just need to say, be careful if you're using scissors. I just make sure I'm not using scissors that are sharp like a razor blade, and it's not a problem. So what I've got is the square, the 4-inch square, now cut out of the 5.5-inch piece of card. Because what I'll do is I'll place that on the top of there like this. So we're just going to move this out of the way. And what I'm going to do is bring in my scoreboard, which I can't speak. Am I going to? No, I'm not bringing in my scoreboard. You can tell that I've not crafted just for a few days because my head's all over the place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Vintage Photo Distress Oxide, because I want something on the inside just to give some colour. So I'm going to use my Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. Now, I tend to like inks a little bit on the drier side. So if you've got a brand new oxide ink, you need to be very careful and not press very hard. This one's been well used, and I always save some of my well-used ink pads because they're perfect just for dragging across the card. And I'm sort of going to tilt. So I sort of tilt like this and drag it lightly across the card so it's tilted slightly. So I'm just going to drag that across the card. Now, if you wanted to, you could score at 1-inch intervals and you'd have it like faux wood. Now, I'm not doing that because my card is 5.5 inches and I normally like it to be an even number, so I can just score at 1-inch intervals. I could score at 1/2-inch intervals, but for me, I like the wider look for the sort of wood plank kind of effect. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding some of the Vintage Photo, and just move your card each time, just so that you catch a different area. Now, really, it doesn't matter what's on the edges because it's the centre bit that you're going to see. So you want to catch different areas of the card, just where you can add a little bit more ink, and leave some of the whiter areas as well. So if you place this over the top like so, you can see then you've got you can see your colour underneath. I'm then going to grab my Acorn VersaFine Clair, and I'm going to take my stamp with the acorn on, which is Garden times. So I'm going to use it off the acrylic block because I'm just adding parts of the stamp just to the background. So let's grab a piece of copy paper. If I grab a piece of copy paper, then when I over ink, which I will do, then it'll go onto the copier paper. It doesn't really matter if it goes onto the non-stick craft sheet really, because at the end of the day it's a non-stick craft sheet and I can just wipe up. And I'm inking all of the stamp because I never quite know where I'm going. So I'm going to take this, let's make sure you can see that. And I'm going to add a little bit there. So I'm just going to stamp the frame. Doesn't matter what's going on around that frame, it's just the frame area that I want to stamp, just so that it gives me that stamped frame. So I'm going to add a little bit more stamping, so ink up a little bit more of that stamp. And I love the fact that each time you do it, if you get a different area of the stamp each time, it just looks a little bit different. And if you miss little bits, that's not a problem, because you can add little bits to it as well. So and you can just add little bits of the text, so each time you can just grab different areas, just so that you add different highlights of the stamp. And I love it because even though you've got an A7 stamp, if you stamp it differently in different areas each time, you wouldn't know that that was an A7 stamp. It could be a bigger stamp. Just pick that. I've got a nice dry baby white because I started hours ago. I was about to record and then I had to stop. But I love the stamps with little bits of different details on that I can add to the frame. Now, I did a framed piece like this in a video previously that's on my YouTube, and I've still got that piece of copier paper that I stamped because I will actually use that in a project. I've still got that piece of copier paper. Excuse me. So even if you miss little bits, don't stress about it too much. So you can just infill with little areas of text. Let's grab that text again. I love the fact it's got the garden wording on there as well, because obviously I'm going to add a flower. There we go. You see, I'd missed a little bit of white there, but not a problem. I can just infill with a little bit more text. And the last little bit we'll have here. So just move around your stamp, just so that you stamp up different areas. So now I've got most of that ink on my copier paper rather than on the non-stick craft sheet. So what I've got now is a lovely frame. And if I bring this in, you can see I've then got the brown underneath. However, I want a little bit of shading on that because with having the brown, it's a little bit too stark. Obviously, it's entirely up to you how you want to colour. Now, this is a permanent ink pad that I've stamped here, so that won't move now, which is wonderful. I've just dropped my wipes onto the floor. I'm tired because I've done so many jobs in the house. I'm so tired. Right, so let's take the vintage photo. And I'm just using my cut and dry foam. It doesn't matter whether you use a brush or whether you use a sponge, whatever you've got to hand. Now, if I use a brush, it's going to be a lot gentler feel to it. This is more dense, the cut and dry foam. So the ink, you get a richer, darker feel to that ink. So I'm going to start on my non-stick craft sheet and just bring this in. And just so that we can have some of all that vintage tone just on our background. You know, sometimes you want a white frame. Against the vintage backdrop, it's a little bit too stark. I don't mind having a little bit of white, but it's a little bit too stark for the project I'm going for. So I'm then going to go back in with a little bit more ink, and I'm just going to make sure that the edges are a little bit darker. And what I'm doing is I'm picking this ink that's here on my non-stick craft sheet. I'm still picking that up and adding it to the edges. So I'm still dragging the ink that's off the non-stick craft sheet and dragging that onto the edges, just to give me a little bit more definition at the edges. There we go. Let's pick this up. Just wipe that clean. And I've got my frame upside down, which is lovely. So there's my framed piece with the vintage tones just underneath. Now what I want to do is add a little bit of colour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my A6 stamp set, which is Build Me Up Buttercup. So I just love these flowers. You know that I'm flower mad, but I love adding them to projects. So I'm going to use stamp set 988. So cards, Tracy. Got that many scraps of card lying around. So first of all, I'm going to take the bigger floral, which is on the A6 stamp set, which is like this, the Buttercup flat, as if the petals have been flattened out. So this is quite a substantial flower for an A6 stamp set. It's beautiful. So if I ink that up, again, a good tapping with that ink pad to add a good layer of ink. And even though there's nothing below that, it's just the Pink Frog Smooth, Super Smooth card, 300 GSM. It should be absorbent because even though it's super smooth, it's got some absorbency. It's not like the Bristol Smooth that is very smooth and slightly slick surface. So I can take my acrylic block and just curl that. And I love that image. I just think that is beautiful. I never tire of stamps, never tire of them. And then I'm going to use the smaller Buttercup when it's closed up and it starts to fade. So let's use that one. And this one I've stamped twice. I have cut these out just so that you're not watching me cut out. Again, that feels like I did that hours ago before I was paused. But let's just add the Buttercup. There we go. My acrylic blocks could all do with a good wash, but you get so engrossed in creating. It's too, you know, there's no time for washing. That's boring. There's enough cleaning to last a lifetime. So you can see they've both got that lovely little bit of text just in there. Just makes me happy. And I've actually cut those out. So I've cut out the larger one and I've cut out the smaller ones. Now what I do is when I've not created for a bit, it always takes me a bit longer to think things through, because you even after a few days you feel a little bit rusty. So I'm going to add this here, but what I want to do is trim that stem a little bit. So let's just trim. Let's move this up so you can see. Just so that you can see, I'm going to add this here somewhere and then add my others as well. So I'm going to add some colour to those. And I did remember to pull them out. So I've got my Ecoline pens. Doesn't matter whether you use your Inktense or whatever you want to use. Let's pick these up. And I've got my yellows all separate like this because they don't fit in me zip-up container, because I've got doubles of some things. So what colours have we got? Let's have a look. A deep yellow. And what's this one? Looks like an ochre, doesn't it? Yellow ochre. Yeah, let's have a little bit of darkness. So I've got yellow ochre 227, and I'm using the brush pens, and I've got deep yellow 202. So I'm going to use the dark colour first. That's a lovely rich colour. What did he say it was? Did it say it was yellow ochre? Yes, I'm into sort of ochres at the moment. My daughter's, I did my daughter's bedroom. That isn't my daughter's bedroom, it's now my spare bedroom, but I still call it my daughter's bedroom. And that's in ochres. I really like it. So I'm adding the deeper colour, and then I'm going to blend with the lighter colour. Now we all colour in different ways. I just like to blend out that harsh line just with the lighter colour. And then I like to scribble on my non-stick craft sheet. Don't ask me to speak because I can't speak at the moment. There's something wrong with my brain and the signals getting to the rest. Like, you know, my lips and actually speaking properly. I can't speak, I can't function. Just ignore me. There's a bit of pink on there, which we definitely don't want. So let's just, and I'm being ever such a good girl and trying to put everything away. But I do like to work with a clean brush. Now you professionals out there will have 50 brushes that you'll have out at the same time. Me not being a professional, I just try and use as little as possible so that I haven't got too much product on my desk trying to hunt for everything. So what I'm doing now is I'm watering down the lightest colour so that it becomes like a wash, but it becomes like a third colour to blend out the previous colours. So I'm using that wash just to blend out that colour. And I love doing that because it's a nice simple way. I'm all for simplicity. I'm all for not making things too complicated. You make them too complicated and then you don't want to do them. So I'm adding some more of that ochre colour just so that it's a little bit darker. So what I'm doing is I'm adding layers of colour. So go back in with the lighter colour and just blend a little bit more with the lighter colour. You can't expect to get depth by just adding one layer. So then I'm going to scribble the lightest colour, which is the deep yellow, and I'm going to pick it up and then just blend the colour. Nice simple way to colour. And you can see that I've left little bits of white areas. That's just me. You don't have to leave the white areas if you don't wish. And what I'm going to do is do the little buttercup as well, and exactly the same way I'm going to add that darker ochre just at the sort of base, and then I'm going to blend. Oh, I'm going to chuck my pen. I can't function, can't speak. I'm going to take the lighter colour and just blend those out. So let's just blend those. And then take a little bit of that colour, and then I'm just going to blend out just with the lightest of the colours, like exactly like I did on the other one. Now, I always think, for me personally, it's a good idea if you can give them time to rest, because if you do that, when you add layers, it actually shows better, because you've given it time to dry, and then you add another layer on the top. Obviously, you don't want to wait for my layers to dry, or else you might be falling asleep. So just adding a little bit more. There we go. Just lovely. So I don't think I need that now. So I've got my sort of buttercup-ish colours. You could even add a little bit of orange if you wanted to. So if I bring in my card, now I can stick this down because I quite like how that looks. Let me just grab that adhesive. So I can just stick that down. And I always think that if you're doing a vintage sort of backdrop, you can always add a pop of colour with a pop of red, a pop of yellow, you know, a pop of orange, a pop of blue, and they all work really nicely. So if you're ever stuck, do a vintage backdrop and then add a pop of colour. Just works beautifully. I'm just going to pick that up just so that we've sort of got it around about level. That's it. I wouldn't call that level there, Tracy. That's better. Just so that we've got that framed. And when you add the florals, you know, you can faff around adding your florals however you want. I'm going to add some dimension, but it just gives it a pop of colour. Right, I'm just going to grab another stamp set. So I want to just add a little bit of text in the background. So what I'm going to do is use my stamp set 922 30 days. And the 30 days text works beautifully because it's not describing anything, so you can use it for anything because it's just about the seasons, so you can add it for any background. And I'm going to continue with that acorn. So let's add that acorn and just ink that stamp and just add some of that in the background. And I'm not pressing very hard, I'm pressing quite lightly. When your text is quite fine, don't be tempted to press too hard, especially if, like me, you're not using an acrylic block. You don't want to press too hard so that it goes and it squishes out. The sound effect, you know, just so that you understand what I'm talking about. I know you like my sound effects. So let's just add that there. So again, not pressing too hard, just works really nicely having that little bit of text in there. And I do like to use my stamps. So I'm going to grab, she says, just moving my trolley out the way. I'm going to grab some of my sisal nest, which is wonderful because I've just hoovered up and I just want to add a few more bits to the carpet, because then, you know, it's really nice when you've just hoovered up if you do that. It makes you feel good. Let's just try and gather them all on the card to save any more hoovering. Hoovering's overrated. And after the amount of hoovering I've done for the last 10 days, I never want to see a hoover as long as I live. Right, let's just add this sisal nest. And what I like about the sisal nest, doesn't have to be sisal nest. You can add some torn paper, shred it through the shredder and add some little strips of torn paper. It just adds texture and another dimension to your card. So what I've got now is I'm going to take my pin flare, which will capture all that sisal nest. So I just need to add a little, you can't see that, I need to add a little bit of adhesive just to the stem. So we're just going to go down here and add that to the stem. And then just before, I can't pick it up, before I do anything else, I'm going to add a little bit more sort of depth. I'm pinching the petals just to give it some movement, and just add a good dollop of pin flare glue. Let me just, what you need to be aware of with your pin flare glue is if you don't sort of push it to the top, you end up with a little clog. And I shouldn't admit this, but I do like it when there's a bit of a clog because I can unplug it then. I know, I am strange. So let's add that there. So just press that down, but not too much, just so that it captures that sisal nest. And because you've got that sisal nest, you've got the texture from the sisal nest. And you need to make sure that it catches that. So let's add a little bit of adhesive just down there and hold that down. You do ask for, well, I ask for trouble by adding the sisal nest. I'm adding texture underneath the adhesive. So you just have to give it a little bit longer for the adhesive on the stem just to grab hold. There you go. It grabs hold quite quickly. And what you have to do with your pin flare is make sure that it's all the way to the top. So let's add a little bit more adhesive down to the stem. And this is where Tracy faffs. I'm just going to pinch that a little bit. And it pinches very easily because you've put moisture on there. Just like that. And again, that captures a little bit more of that sisal nest. So I'm just holding that down just to make sure. And what I like is that yellow lemon ochre mix adds some life to that neutral vintage backdrop. So let's take a little bit more, add the adhesive down there. And at this stage, just see if you've got any loose bits, you can just add them there. And just pinch this. And I normally faff on the last one, just because I like to. And because I'm a pain. Let's just tuck that in a bit. I want you to see the sort of ochre-y colours just against the vintage tones, just so that you can see that against the vintage tones. And that sisal nest just adds some textures, but shredded paper, bits of cotton, it all adds to that wonderful texture. So I'm just pushing this up to the top just to make sure there's no air pockets like there was last time, even though I like to get out the little bit of the bit that's clogged. Right. What I want to do is I want to see if it will look nice with a little bit of texture from some natural twine. But if it doesn't, I don't use it. Even if I think of something and I think, oh, I'll add this to this card this time, and I add it and it looks rubbish, I don't necessarily add it. So I'm just adding a little bow. Just make that shorter by pulling. That's it, just want a nice little bow. There we go. just add my natural bow just to the bottom there. So let's take some of that adhesive, a nice good dollop of adhesive, just so that it holds that in place. Now the Tonic Deluxe adhesive, once it's grabbed hold, it's pretty strong, that is. So let's just add that there. But you do need to hold it down just a few moments and not rush that, just so that it's got time just to grab hold. Just going to lift that up just so that you can see the little bow. And I love the text behind there. It's really nice. So let's take our stamps. And let me just place those back. That's it. And I want a sentiment, so I'm going to use, what have we got? Nature is a weed or a flower, which it is, just because I think I'm going to use the word buttercup. There we go. So we only need our A7 acrylic block. I'm sure I've got that upside down, but there you go. So I'm going to ink that in the black. Oh, I hadn't. I thought I'd got it upside down. So I'm just going to stamp that against a straight edge, which will help me when I'm stamping to keep that straight. I don't always get it straight even then. So let's just place that onto my stamp sheet. And then we'll just cut that out. Now I do like touches of white just to give that pop. However, when I'm doing vintage makes, I do like to just add a little bit of that vintage just against the edges of the sentiment. And then I do faff. I'm going to add this here. Yep. Oh, just chucked it across the room. And what I'm going to do is just add it to one edge where the B is for Buttercup, just here at this edge. Just so that I can just stick that down there, but sort of bend it a little bit. Just give that time. There we go. Just so that we can add the Buttercup there. Now have I got I've got that many stamp sets. I want my little bird. I nearly then pulled out something that I shouldn't pull out. A7. There we go. So I'm then going to grab my little trusty Quill Ends. Love this stamp set. Stamp set 908, and I'm going to use my little bird just on there. There we go. And you can see I've got fibres everywhere. All adds to the texture. There we go. Oh, I've stamped it in brown ink. Do I want it in brown ink? This is why you always look at what you're using. Or do I want it in black ink? Now you know what I'm going to do, don't you? Stamp both. But that is why you need to make sure that you ink with the right. I think the black is going to give it a little bit more of a pop against that brown background. If I add the brown bird, it's sort of going to merge with the background, for my eyes anyway. Yes, I want to use the black. So I'm going to cut that little bird out. Just leaving a little tiny white border. There we go. That's it. Just so that I can add my bird, and then I can sort of add him here as if he's looking at the florals. So I need that pin flare glue. So where was I thinking there? So just adding a little bit of pin flare glue just towards the bottom, just to secure that in place, just so that he is looking at the florals. It's funny, isn't it, where the time goes? It just vanishes when you're creating. So what I want to do now is grab my little Posca pen. I love this little yellow Posca pen. It's only one of the very sort of fine ones, but I love adding a few splatters of the yellow. And I must admit that this little yellow splatters quite well. If you find that you're not getting any splatters, then just try sort of pumping that pen and giving it a good shake onto your non-stick craft sheet. It'll just help with your splatters. So if we bring that up, you can see those sort of yellowy splatters on there. Obviously it's a good idea if you let it dry before you do anything else. I'm then going to just take, just make sure it works. Just get that gel pen flowing. And I always test it on white card where you can't see. And I'm just going to add a few little touches of white, which obviously when I'm doing this, you can't see this on camera, but I will hold that up just so that you can see the little tiny touches of white, which is more for the recipient than anything else, personally. Just so you can see, just some, come on camera, focus, some little touches of white just here and just on here as well. And I'm just going to look, let me see. I've got my washi tape, which is called Around #44. So it's got lots of different words on there. And I'm just going to pick a couple of words just that I would like to use on a piece that I've had lying around for a long time. I'm just going to, you've got this sisal nest now, so you just need to make sure that you just move that sisal nest out of the way. And I love a little bit of washi just to add an extra detail. And I also love washi for adding as focal imagery as well when I'm doing a different style card. I love having the option. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is I've got my 5.5 inch piece of card, just as we can see here, and then I'm going to add that to a black mat, because that black mat will make the black on here and the black with the bird really pop, and you see that more in the flesh than you do through a camera lens. So let me just add. Now if you've got any sisal nest sort of behind your card, just make sure you add plenty of adhesive if you've got that texture at the back. So I'm going to add just here. And I love mixing and matching sets. There we go. And so that is a 5.5 inch that I've worked on, 5 3/4 inch black mat, and what I've got is a 6.5 inch square card to add that to. And let's just add this to here. There we go. I just take my time when I'm adding the matting and layering, just so that I get that just how I want it. That's it. And if I lift that up, you can see there. Now if you wanted to, you could add little touches of the ochre to your border if you want. I don't want to do that because I quite like how it is now, but I will add just a little bit just to this floral on the little bird, just to give another little touch of colour with my Ecoline pens. There we go. Let me just add a little touch of white here. That's it. And if I lift that up so that you can see, just got a little touch of colour in the bird's flower. But if you wanted to, you could add some ochre here. But what I find is if I added ochre here, it sort of detracts attention from the main focal image. And that's why I've left the frame in a vintage tone, just so that you can see that. And I love how the acorn goes beautifully around the frame. And I think I'll be doing the frame again. And those of you with your square dies, you can do that quite easily. Absolutely love that. And I'm not going to add any white splatters this time because I want the yellow splatters to do the talking. So I hope you've enjoyed that card and the step-by-steps, and I look forward to seeing your interpretation. Lots of love, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.